The first frost you wake in darkness, and immediately you know something has changed. The air itself feels different against your face, sharp, biting, alive with a coldness that makes your nose sting even beneath the woolen blanket pulled up to your chin. You lie perfectly still for a moment, reluctant to move, reluctant to disturb the small pocket of warmth your body has created during the night. Outside, you can hear nothing. No bird song, no movement, just an eerie, muffled silence that means only one thing. The first frost has come. You exhale and watch your breath rise in a pale cloud, visible even in the near total darkness of your cottage. It hangs there for a moment before dissolving into the cold air, and the sight of it sends a small shiver of anxiety through your chest. This is it, then. The moment you've been dreading since the harvest moon began to wane. Winter is no longer coming. Winter is here. Beside you, you can feel the warmth of your husband's body, still deeply asleep. On the other side, your daughter, only 6 years old, is curled against you like a small animal, her breathing soft and steady. You don't want to wake them yet. Let them have a few more moments of peace, of warmth, before the reality of this day begins. But you cannot stay here forever. Slowly, carefully, you push back the blanket. The cold hits you immediately, like stepping into a river. You're already wearing your wool chemise, you've slept in your clothes since September. Everyone does, but it's not enough against this kind of cold. Your fingers fumble in the darkness for the second tunic hanging on a peg near the bed, and you pull it over your head with shaking hands. 2 layers. By midwinter, you'll be wearing 3, maybe 4, and still you'll never feel truly warm. Your feet touch the packed earth floor, and you gasp. It's like ice. You'd forgotten, somehow, over the summer months of going barefoot, just how brutal this floor becomes when the ground freezes. You grope for your wool stockings, pulling them on quickly. Then the leather shoes you stuff with straw each night to keep them dry. They're stiff with cold. The cottage is dark, so dark you can barely see your own hands. There's no window here. Only the wealthy have glass windows, and shutters let in too much cold once winter arrives. So the only light comes from the faint glow of embers in the hearth at the center of the room. You move toward it carefully, knowing every step by heart. 3 paces forward, 2 to the left. Don't trip over the sleeping dog. Don't disturb the chickens roosting in the corner. You kneel before the hearth, your knees protesting against the cold, hard floor, and lean close to examine the embers. Your heart, which has been tight with anxiety since you woke, relaxes just slightly. They're still alive, glowing faintly beneath the ash, small red eyes in the darkness. You breathe out slowly. If the fire had died in the night, this morning would have been so much harder. Starting a fire from scratch with flint and steel, with numb fingers in a freezing cottage, is a miserable, desperate business. You've done it before. You'll do it again, but not today. Thank God, not today. You feed the embers carefully, gently, the way you'd coax a sick child to take broth. A handful of straw first, watching as it catches and flares. Then small sticks, arranged in a careful pyramid. Finally, a larger piece of wood from the stack beside the hearth, though you hesitate before adding it. Your eyes measuring the pile, calculating how long it will last. You and your husband spent weeks gathering wood last month, dragging fallen branches from the forest, cutting and splitting and stacking until your backs ached and your hands bled. It seemed like so much then. Now, looking at it in the dim firelight, it seems terribly, frighteningly small. But there's nothing to be done about that now. You add the wood and watch as the flames grow, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The warmth touches your face, your hands, and you lean into it gratefully, trying to absorb as much heat as you can before you have to move again. Around you, the cottage begins to wake. Your husband stirs, coughs, sits up. Your daughter whimpers at the loss of his warmth. The dog stretches and pads over to the fire, pressing against your side. In the corner, the goat bleats softly, and you know you'll have to take her out soon, frost or no frost. She can't stay inside all day, not yet. That comes later, in the deep winter, when it's too dangerous to let any animal outside. Your husband joins you by the fire, saying nothing, just reaching his hands toward the flames. His face in the firelight looks older than it did last spring, thinner. There are lines around his eyes you don't remember seeing before. He's thinking the same thing you are, you realize, calculating, worrying, wondering if you've prepared enough, gathered enough, stored enough to see your family through to spring. You've lived through 28 winters. You know what's coming. The cold that seeps into your bones and never truly leaves, even when you're standing right beside the fire. The darkness that makes days feel endless and nights feel eternal. The constant gnawing hunger that starts in January and grows worse with every week, as the stores in the cellar dwindle and there's nothing growing outside to supplement them. The illnesses that sweep through the village, taking the old and the very young, the weak and the unlucky. The fear every single day that something will go wrong, the roof will leak, the fire will go out, someone will fall ill, the food will run out hand. There will be nothing you can do about it. Winter in the 14th century is not a season. It's a test, a trial, a battle you fight with everything you have. And sometimes, even when you fight your hardest, you still lose. But you're not dead yet. Your family is here, warm, together. The fire is burning. You have food in the cellar, not enough, never enough, but something. You have wood. You have each other. Outside, the frost is painting delicate patterns on the dead grass, turning the world silver and white and beautiful and deadly. Inside, you pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and begin to plan the day. There's so much to do. The animals need tending. The water bucket has probably frozen. You'll need to break the ice. You need to check the food stores again, see exactly what you have, ration it carefully. Your husband needs to stuff more moss and mud into the gaps in the walls where the wind whistles through. Your daughter needs to be kept busy, kept moving, kept from complaining about the cold. If you've ever wondered what it truly felt like to face winter without central heating, without grocery stores, without any safety net at all, stay with me. Let me take you back to a world where survival was never guaranteed, where every choice mattered, where winter was something you endured with courage and community and sheer, stubborn resilience. This is your medieval winter. This is how you survive it. The harvest panic, preparing before the freeze but gathering food, was only the beginning. The first frost is a warning, not the enemy itself. You have time still, a few weeks, maybe a month if you're lucky, before the real cold settles in and makes outdoor work nearly impossible. These weeks are precious. Every single day counts. Every hour of daylight must be used. There is no room for rest, no room for error. What you do now, in these frantic days of late autumn, will determine whether your family eats in February or starves. You learned this lesson from your mother, who learned it from hers. Preparation is survival. Laziness is death. The work begins at dawn and doesn't end until long after dark. Your husband is in the fields with the other men, gathering the last stubborn turnips and parsnips before the ground freezes solid. Root vegetables can tolerate some cold, they're hardy. Thank God, but once the earth turns to iron, there's no digging them out. Whatever remains in the ground will stay there until spring, rotting uselessly beneath the frozen soil while your family goes hungry above it. You're in the cottage yard with your daughter and the other village women, working with a desperate efficiency that comes from generations of practice. There are cabbages to cut and layer in barrels with salt, onions to braid and hang from the rafters, beans to shell and store in clay pots. Every scrap of food must be preserved, protected, hidden away against the hungry months ahead. Your hands are raw and aching. You've been cutting cabbage for hours, and the knife has raised blisters on your palm that broke and bled, and now sting with every movement. But you don't stop. You can't stop. There are still 3 more cabbages waiting, and the afternoon light is already fading. Salt. Everything depends on salt. It's expensive, so expensive that you've saved for months to buy enough, but without it, the meat will rot, the vegetables will spoil, and by midwinter you'll have nothing left but hard bread and desperation. You use it carefully, sparingly, measuring it out like the precious substance it is. Each cabbage leaf gets a thin sprinkle before being pressed into the barrel, layer upon layer, the salt drawing out moisture and creating a brine that will preserve the vegetables for months. If you do it right, if the proportions are correct, if the barrel doesn't leak, if the brine doesn't go bad, so many ifs, so many ways for everything to go wrong. Your neighbor, Agnes, is working beside you, salting her own cabbage with hands that shake slightly. She's worried. You can see it in the tightness around her mouth, the way she keeps glancing at her barrel as if counting, calculating. Her husband died last spring, and she's facing this winter alone with 3 young children. The village will help her, of course. That's what neighbors do. But there's only so much help anyone can offer when everyone is struggling, when every family is rationing their own supplies, watching their own stores dwindle with mounting anxiety. Do you think it'll be enough? She asks, quietly, not looking at you. You want to reassure her. You want to say yes, of course, you'll be fine. But you've learned not to make promises about winter. It'll have to be, you say, instead, and she nods, understanding. That's the only answer there ever is. The men return from the fields as the sun is setting, their backs bent under loads of turnips and parsnips, their faces exhausted. Your husband dumps his harvest beside the cottage door and immediately begins sorting through it. The damaged ones split by the cold, nibbled by mice get set aside for immediate eating. They won't keep. The good ones, the solid ones, get carried down into the root cellar. The root cellar is your lifeline. It's just a hole dug beneath the cottage floor, lined with stones to keep it from collapsing. But it stays cool and dark and relatively dry, and that makes it invaluable. This is where you keep the turnips and parsnips and beets, layered in sand to prevent them from touching each other, from spreading rot. This is where the barrels of salted cabbage will go, and the clay pots of beans, and the precious, carefully wrapped rounds of cheese. You climb down into it, your daughter passing vegetables to you one by one, and arrange them with meticulous care. Each turnip must be checked for soft spots, each parsnip examined for damage. Anything questionable gets rejected. Better to eat it now than risk it rotting and contaminating the others. You've seen it happen. One bad turnip can ruin a dozen good ones, and by the time you discover it, it's too late. The cellar smells of earth and damp stone, and the faint sweetness of stored apples from the manor orchard. The Lord's steward distributed them last week. A small charity that everyone knows is more about preventing waste than genuine kindness, but you're grateful nonetheless. Apples won't last the whole winter, but they'll help. Every little bit helps. Outside, your husband is on the roof, stuffing moss and mud into the gaps between the thatch where the wind gets through. It's dangerous work. The thatch is slippery, the ladder unsteady, but it has to be done. A drafty cottage in summer is uncomfortable. A drafty cottage in winter can kill you. The cold doesn't need a wide opening to get in. It finds every crack, every gap, every tiny space, and it pours through like water, stealing your warmth, stealing your heat, stealing the life from your body degree by degree. Other families are doing the same work all over the village. You can hear hammering, sawing, the occasional shout. Everyone is racing against the same invisible deadline. That moment when the real cold arrives and outdoor work becomes impossible. Thomas the carpenter is reinforcing his door, adding extra planks to keep out drafts. The miller is checking his grain stores for the 100th time, running his hands through the wheat and barley, looking for any sign of weevils or moisture that would mean disaster. The widow Eleanor is piling firewood against the side of her cottage, her sons hauling load after load from the forest, never quite believing they have enough, because they don't. No one ever has enough. You know this in your bones, in your blood, in the cold pit of your stomach. No matter how much you gather, how carefully you prepare, how hard you work during these desperate weeks, it will not be enough. Winter always lasts longer than you expect. The food always runs out sooner than you hope. There will come a day, probably in February, when the cold is at its worst and spring still seems impossibly far away, when you'll reach into the root cellar and find it nearly empty, when you'll scrape the bottom of the barrel for the last salty, limp cabbage leaves, when you'll water down the porridge until it's barely more than flavored liquid and feed it to your daughter while your own stomach clenches with hunger. You know this. You've lived it before, and still you prepare. Still you work until your hands bleed and your back screams and you can barely stand. Because what else can you do? Give up? Surrender before the battle even begins? No, you're not made that way. None of you are. You're peasants, common folk, the people history rarely remembers, but you're survivors. You face impossible odds every single year, and every single year you fight as darkness finally falls and you can no longer see to work. You gather with your family around the fire. The cottage is crowded now, with all the supplies brought in from outside, barrels and baskets and bundles of herbs hanging from every rafter. It smells of earth and onions and wood smoke and the particular mustiness of root vegetables. It smells like preparation, like survival. Your daughter is already half asleep, exhausted from the day's work. Your husband sits with his head in his hands, calculating in silence. You stir the pot hanging over the fira-thin soup of leeks and barley and try not to think about how many more meals you'll need to make it last. Have you ever had to prepare for something knowing there was no backup plan, no store to run to if you ran out, no rescue coming if you failed? Leave a comment about how that felt, because tonight, as you lie down in the darkness with winter pressing close around your small cottage, that feeling is all too familiar. The cottage in winter, your cold, dark homes. The days grew shorter and the cold deepened. Your world shrank to this one room, 12 feet by 12 feet, maybe less. Packed earth floor, wattle and daub walls, thatched roof that leaks in 3 places no matter how much your husband patches it. One door, low and narrow, that you keep firmly shut from November to March. No windows, just gaps in the walls that you stuffed with straw weeks ago. Accepting the perpetual darkness as the price of keeping out the wind. This is your entire universe now. This single room where you cook and eat and work and sleep and live. Day after day, week after week, month after endless month. You share it with 7 souls, if you count generously. Yourself, your husband, your daughter. The goat, she came inside when the snow started, because she'd die if left in the shed, and you need her milk. 2 chickens roosting in the corner, their eggs too valuable to risk to foxes or cold. And the dog, thin and grame-souled, who sleeps by the fire and earns his keep by killing rats. 7 bodies in 12 feet by 12 feet. 7 bodies, breathing, eating, sleeping, existing in a space smaller than most modern bedrooms. The smell is what strikes you first, every morning when you wake. It's inescapable, unavoidable, so constant that sometimes you forget it's there until a gust of wind brings fresh air through some crack and you realize how thick the air has become. It's the smell of unwashed bodies. You haven't properly bathed since October and won't again until spring. It's far too cold to undress, and heating enough water is an impossible luxury. It's the smell of the goat, her droppings in the corner that you clean out daily but can never quite eliminate. The chickens, the dog, wood smoke that permeates everything, your clothes, your hair, your skin, until you taste it even in your sleep. Damp wool, damp earth, damp everything, because the moisture from 7 breathing creatures has nowhere to go and condenses on the walls, trickling down in cold rivulets, and underneath it all, the smell of the chamber pot that sits in the far corner. Because going outside in the middle of a winter night isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. You've learned to breathe shallowly. Everyone has. It's just part of winter, like the cold and the hunger and the darkness. The darkness is its own kind of torture. It presses against your eyes, thick and absolute, from late afternoon until morning. Candles are expensive, made of tallow, smoky and fowls melting in. You can't afford to burn them for more than an hour or 2 each night. The fire provides some light, of course, but its glow is fitful and dim, casting more shadows than illumination. You've learned to do everything by feel, to navigate the cottage with your hands outstretched, counting steps, remembering where objects are. Your daughter has bumped her head on the hanging herbs so many times she now walks with one hand raised, protectively above her. Sometimes you wonder if you're going blind, if your eyes are forgetting how to see in proper light. It's a foolish worry. Spring always comes. The sun always returns, but in the depths of winter, with darkness pressing close around you 16 hours a day, it doesn't feel foolish. It feels terrifyingly possible. The cold is worse than the darkness. At least the darkness is just absence. The cold is presence. It's active, aggressive, alive. It creeps through every gap in the walls despite the straw stuffing. It rises from the frozen ground beneath your feet. It hangs in the air itself, turning your breath to mist, making your joints ache, stealing the warmth from your body faster than you can generate it. The fire burns constantly in the center of the room, but its warmth extends only a few feet. Stand close enough to feel warm, and the smoke makes your eyes water and your lungs burn. Step back enough to breathe clearly, and the cold rushes in. There's no comfortable distance. There's no winning. You're always either too hot and choking or too cold and miserable. At night, you all sleep together. The bed is just a wooden frame with rope supports and a mattress stuffed with strawlumpy, scratchy straw that's breaking down into dust after months of use and should have been changed in autumn. But you needed every scrap of straw for the animals' bedding and your own shoes. Your daughter sleeps between you and your husband, the warmest position, the safest position. The dog sleeps at your feet. Sometimes the goat lies beside the bed, her warmth welcome despite the smell. You sleep in all your clothes, to chemises, to tunics, wool stockings, a shawl wrapped around your head. The blanket on top of you is wool, thick and heavy, and there's another blanket of sheepskin that you all huddle beneath together. Even so, you wake several times each night, shivering, your nose numb with cold, the air in the cottage like ice despite the glowing embers in the hearth. Your husband gets up at least once every night to feed the fire. It can't be allowed to go out, ever. The cold waiting outside would rush in within minutes, and by morning the cottage would be uninhabitable. The water bucket frozen solid, your survival in immediate jeopardy. So he staggers out of bed, half asleep, adds wood to the fire, and crawls back beneath the blankets to steal warmth from your body and your daughter's. Sometimes you lie awake listening to the sounds of winter, the wind howling around the eaves, finding every crack, every weakness in your shelter. Snow sliding off the roof with a soft thump that makes your heart jump, wondering if it's something worse, something dangerous. The goat's quiet breathing, your daughter's occasional whimper as she dreams. The settling of the house creaks and groans as the wooden frame contracts in the cold. And underneath it all, silence. Deep, profound, unsettling silence. No birds, no insects, no sounds of life from outside at all. Just your small island of warmth and breath and existence, surrounded by an ocean of cold and darkness and death. You spend your days in constant, desperate activity, trying to stay warm. You card wool, your fingers moving mechanically, making thread that you'll weave into cloth if you can afford a loom someday, or sell if you need coins more desperately. Your daughter practices her spinning, the small whirl dropping and catching, while you encourage her with patient words, even though your own hands are cramping with cold and your patience is worn threadbare. Your husband repairs tools, sharpens blades, braids rope from dried reeds. Busy hands stay warmer. Busy hands don't dwell on the cold, the hunger, the slow crawl of days until spring. The fire is the center of everything. You cook over at one pot hanging from an iron hook, containing whatever thin soup or porridge is today's meal. You huddle around it for warmth. You dry wet clothes beside it when clothes get wet, which they inevitably do. The goat is tied near it. The chickens roost as close as they dare. Every aspect of life in this cottage radiates out from those flames. And when you look into them, as you do often, mesmerized by their movement, their warmth, their light, to understand why your ancestors worshipped fire as a god. Because here, in this cold, dark cottage, fire is a god. It's the difference between life and death, between survival and surrender. Your home is not comfortable. It's barely adequate. But it's yours, and it's shelter. And as winter rages outside, and the frost creeps up the walls in delicate, deadly patterns, you're grateful for it. Grateful for these walls, this roof, this space where your family can huddle together and breathe and survive another day. Hunger month, when the food runs low by February. The barrels in the corner were worryingly light. You knew this was coming. You've known since November, really, when you first counted the supplies and did the mental arithmetic that every peasant woman learns by heart. So many turnips, so many people, so many meals per day, so many days until the first spring greens appear. The numbers never quite add up. They never have. But knowing doesn't make it easier when the reality arrives. You reach into the root, cellar your arm extending down into that dark, cold holeland. Your fingers find only 4 turnips. 4. There used to be hundreds down there, piled in layers of sand, a reassuring weight of food that meant safety. Now there are 4 wrinkled, slightly soft turnips, and when you pull them up into the dim firelight, you can see patches of rot spreading across their surfaces like bruises. 4 turnips for 3 people. Maybe a week of meals if you're very, very careful. If you water down the soup until it's barely more than flavored liquid, if you add more wild herbs, if you can find any under the snow. If you don't think too hard about the gnawing emptiness in your stomach that's become your constant companion, this is the hunger gap. The time your grandmother called the wolf at the door. When winter has consumed most of your stores, but spring is still cruelly, impossibly distant. The time when people start to die. Not dramatically, not suddenly. Just a slow fading. The old get weaker, stay in bed longer, stop fighting against the cold. The very young grow listless, their eyes too large in their thin faces. Illness sweeps through the village, a cough. A fever-on bodies that might have recovered in summer simply don't have the strength now, don't have the reserves. Don't have enough food in their bellies to fuel the fight. You cut the rot away from the turnips, salvaging what you can. Every scrap matters now. The parts you would have thrown to the chickens in autumn go into the pot. The peelings that would have fed the goat get saved, dried, added to tomorrow's meal. Nothing is wasted. Nothing can be wasted. The pot hangs over the fire, and you add the turnips, a handful of barley or second to a last handful. You don't think about the last one yet, not yet some water from the bucket. You had an onion 2 weeks ago. You remember it vividly. the sharp, sweet smell of it, the flavor it added to the soup. It seems like a feast now, that meal with an onion in it. A memory from a time of plenty. The soup cooks, thin and pale. You stir it, staring into the pot, trying to will it to become more substantial. It doesn't work. It never works. Physics and magic are two different things, and only one of them operates in this cottage. Your daughter sits by the fire, wrapped in her shawl, not complaining. She stopped complaining weeks ago. At first, you thought this was maturity, growth, a sign she was learning patience. Now you realize it's exhaustion. She doesn't have the energy to complain. She just sits, quiet and still, trying to conserve what little strength she has. When did her cheeks get so hollow? When did her wrists get so thin that you can circle them with your thumb and forefinger? You look at her and see your own childhood, your own hungry Februaries, the ones you survived and the ones that killed your younger brother and your baby sister. History repeating itself, generation after generation, an endless cycle of winter and hunger and loss. Your husband is worse. He does heavy labor. He has to. There's no choice. The animals still need tending. The roof still needs repairing after storms. The village still needs men who can work, and heavy labor requires food. He gets the largest portions. It's not favoritism. It's survival strategy. If he collapses, you all die. So he eats first. He eats most. And even so, you can see his ribs now when he changes his tunic. Can see the way his hands shake slightly when he reaches for his bowl. Can see the exhaustion in his eyes that doesn't fade even after a full night's sleep. You eat last. You eat least. This is your role, your duty, your sacrifice. You're the buffer between your family and starvation. When the food is shortened, it's always short, especially now you're the one who takes a smaller portion, who claims you're not hungry, who lies awake at night with your stomach cramping and tells yourself it's fine, it's worth it, they need it more. Sometimes you dream about food, elaborate, vivid dreams where you're at a feastress dead meat, fresh bread, butter, cheese, honey, apples, things you haven't tasted in months or even years. You can smell it in the dream, taste it, feel the satisfaction of a full belly. Then you wake in the dark, cold cottage with your stomach empty and aching. And the disappointment is so crushing you want to weep, but you don't weep. Tears are a luxury, and you have no luxuries left. The village is quiet now in a way it wasn't earlier in winter. People don't visit each other anymore. It wastes energy, wastes warmth, and there's nothing to share anyway. Everyone is hoarding their last supplies, rationing desperately, hoping against hope that they can stretch what remains until the snow melts and the first wild greens appear. You know who's in trouble. Everyone knows. Agnes next door hasn't been outside in days, and when you knocked on her door last week, her voice through the wood was weak and rasping. The old shepherd up the hill lost his wife in January. She went to bed one night and didn't wake up, just slipped away in her sleep. Whether from cold or hunger or simply giving up, no one can say. The blacksmith's youngest child has been coughing for weeks, a wet, terrible sound that doesn't improve. And you've stopped asking about him because you're afraid of the answer. The church still has some grain in its store's charity for the truly desperate, but accepting it means admitting you can't feed your family, means acknowledging failure, means the whole village knowing your shame. You're not there yet. You'll get there, probably, if spring doesn't come soon. But not yet. Not while you still have 4 turnips and a handful of barley and the ability to convince yourself that this is manageable. Your husband found some bark yesterday, stripped it from a fallen tree in the forest, brought it home wrapped in his cloak. You soaked it in water to soften it, then chopped it fine and added it to the soup. It has no nutrition, not really, but it adds bulk. It makes the soup seem more substantial. It tricks your stomach into feeling less empty, at least for a little while. You're eating bark. You've become the kind of person who eats bark. This is what February means. But you're not alone in this. That's the thing you have to remember. The thing that keeps you going when everything feels hopeless. You're not alone. Agnes is eating bark, too. The shepherd is eating bark. Everyone in the village is doing whatever they can to survive, scraping by on almost nothing, fighting the same battle you're fighting. If you're finding this story moving, please subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Because this story, this desperate, honest story of these people mattered. Your ancestors, whoever they were, survived winters like this, survived hunger like this, survived, or you wouldn't be here now. The soup is ready. You ladle it into 3 wooden bowls, dividing it carefully. Your husband's portion is largest. Your daughter's is next. Yours is smallest, though you try to make it look the same. You've gotten good at this deception, tilting the bowl, spreading the contents to make them seem more than they are. You eat slowly, making each spoonful last. The soup is thin and bland and barely warm by the time it reaches your mouth, but it's something. It's a meal. It will keep you alive another day, and that's all you're trying to do now. Survive another day, and then another, and then another, until spring comes, and the snow melts, and the first green shoots appear in the mud, and you can breathe again without feeling like you're suffocating under the weight of winter. The dangers, cold, illness, and isolation, but hunger wasn't the only enemy waiting in the cold. Winter has 1,000 ways to kill you. Some are obvious starvation, freezing to death, the roof collapsing under the weight of heavy snow. Others are subtle, creeping, almost invisible until it's too late. You've learned to watch for all of them, to recognize the signs, to take precautions that sometimes work and sometimes don't. Because the truth is, no matter how careful you are, winter claims lives. Every single year. People you know. People you love. It's just a question of who. Take your hands, for instance. Right now, as you work carding wool by the fire, because idle hands waste warmth and time your fingers are red and swollen. The skin cracked and bleeding around the nails. Chilblains. Everyone gets them. The endless cycle of cold and slight warmth, cold and slight warmth, damages the small blood vessels in your extremities, causing painful inflammation that itches and burns, and sometimes becomes infected. You've wrapped cloth around the worst splits, trying to keep them clean, but clean is a relative term in a medieval cottage. The cloth itself is dirty. Your hands are dirty. Everything is dirty, and there's no way to properly wash in this cold. An infection is always lurking, waiting for an opportunity. Last year, your neighbor John lost 2 fingers to infection that started in July. The flesh turned black, began to smell of rot, and the village wise woman said they had to come off or the rot would spread. She did it herself, with a sharp knife and no pain relief except strong ale. And John screamed so loud you could hear him 3 cottages away. He survived, but he can't grip tools properly anymore, can't do the work he used to do. His family struggled this winter more than most. You rub your hands together, trying to encourage blood flow and push the memory away. Your chilblains are just chilblains. They'll heal in spring, probably. The cough started 3 days ago. Your daughter woke in the night, gasping and hacking, and your heart seized with fear because you know what coughs mean in winter. The cottage is full of smoke from the fire. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets some of the smoke escape while the rest hangs in the air, thick and acrid. Everyone breathes it constantly, and it irritates the lungs, weakens them, makes them vulnerable. You've been listening to her breathe ever since. Is it getting worse? Is there a rattle in her chest? Is her forehead warm? You check obsessively, pressing your hand to her face, trying to determine if she's fevered. But your own hands are so cold it's impossible to tell. Your husband says you're worrying too much. Maybe he's right, but you remember your sister, who started with a cough just like this, who got worse slowly, then quickly, whose lungs filled with fluid until she was drowning in her own body, gasping for air that wouldn't come. She was 9 years old. Your daughter is 6. Medieval medicine understands illness through the lens of humoral theory. Your body contains 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black biland disease, results from imbalance. A cough means too much phlegm, so the treatment is to dry things out with warm herbs and spices. You've made a tea from the precious horehound you gathered last summer, added a tiny scraping of ginger from the even more precious piece you bought from a traveling merchant. You coax your daughter to drink it, and she obeys without complaint, though her face twists at the bitter taste. Will it help? You don't know. The wise woman says it will. The priest says prayer is more powerful than herbs. Your mother used to say that survival is mostly lucksome. People get sick and die. Others don't, and there's no understanding why. You do everything you can and hope it's enough. The real danger is isolation. If someone in your family gets seriously ill, truly, desperately ill, there's no help coming. No doctor, no hospital, no ambulance. The village has a wise woman who knows herbs and can set broken bones and sometimes helps with difficult births. But her knowledge is limited and her supplies are few. The nearest town with anything resembling trained physicians is 2 days' walk away, and winter has made the road impassable. Deep snow, ice, freezing temperatures that could kill you before you made it halfway. You're on your own. Whatever happens in this cottage, you deal with it, yourselves or not at all. Your husband went outside yesterday to check on the shed, make sure the remaining firewood was dry and the roof hadn't collapsed. He was gone for maybe 20 minutes. When he came back inside, he was shaking so violently he could barely close the door. His face white and waxy, his fingers curled into claws. You pulled him to the fire. Stripped off his wet outer tunic, snow had gotten inside somehow, melted against his body heat, soaked through and rubbed his hands and feet vigorously, trying to restore circulation. His fingers were white, completely bloodless, and you knew if you didn't warm them soon, frostbite would set in. Tissue, death, amputation, infection, death. He stood there, shaking and helpless, while you worked. Your daughter brought the sheepskin blanket. The dog pressed against his legs, offering what warmth he could. Slowly, painfully, the color returned to your husband's fingers. They turned red, then purple, then finally a more normal pink. He could move them again, could flex them, though he winced at the pain. Just 20 minutes. I was only outside for 20 minutes. That's how fast winter can kill you. That's how little margin for error exists. 20 minutes of exposure, of wet clothes and frozen wind, and you're fighting for your life. The fire is your lifeline, but it's also a danger. It must burn constantly, but it's an open flame in a cottage made of wood and straw and dried mud. One spark landing on the wrong piece of thatch. One ember rolling out of the hearth while everyone sleeps and everything burns. The cottage, your supplies, your lives. It happens every winter. Somewhere you hear the stories, passed from village to village. A family waking to find their home on fire, scrambling outside into the deadly cold, watching everything they own turn to ash while they stand in the snow and freeze. You're terrified of fire. You're terrified of the fire going out. Both fears live in your chest, simultaneously competing for dominance. You tend the hearth obsessively, making sure the flames never get too high, never spread beyond their designated area, but also never fade to nothing. It's an exhausting vigilance that you maintain every waking moment. And then there are the accidents. Ice on the path outside, invisible under a layer of snow, sending you crashing to the frozen ground. You hit hard, and for a moment you can't breathe, can't move. Just lie there staring up at the gray sky while panic floods your body. What if you broke something? What if you can't walk? What if you can't work? Your family depends on you. They need you. You can't afford to be injured. Eventually, you get up. Nothing is broken, just bruised, just shaken. But you're more careful after that, shuffling rather than walking, testing each step. A broken leg in winter is a death sentence. The priest says suffering brings you closer to God, that winter's hardships are a test of faith, and those who endure with patience and prayer will be rewarded in heaven. You try to believe this. You pray as much as you're able, though mostly your prayers are desperate bargaining. Please let my daughter's cough get better. Please let the food last. Please let us survive until spring. You don't know if God is listening. You don't know if He cares. What you know is that winter is relentless and cruel and indifferent to your prayers, and survival requires more than faith. It requires vigilance, luck, and the stubborn, desperate determination to keep going, even when everything hurts and nothing feels worth it. But you do keep going, because what choice do you have? Your family needs you. Your daughter needs you. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion and the fear and the constant gnawing cold, there's still a spark of hope that spring will come, that you'll survive, that all this suffering will eventually end. You just have to last a little longer. Community and faith, what kept you going in, yet somehow people endured, not alone, but together. Winter strips away everything comfortable, everything easy, everything soft about life. It reduces existence to essentials. But here's what you've learned, what every medieval person learns. The most essential thing isn't food, isn't shelter, isn't even fire. It's other people. It's community. It's the knowledge that you're not facing this darkness alone. On the second Sunday of February, The feast celebrating the purification of Mary. You wrap yourself in every piece of clothing you own and step outside for the first time in 4 days. The cold hits you like a physical blow, stealing your breath, making your eyes water. The world is white and silent and blindingly bright where the sun reflects off the snow. Your daughter takes your hand, and your husband leads the way, breaking a path through the drifts toward the church. You could skip church. God would probably understand. It's dangerous to go outside in this cold, dangerous to expend the energy, dangerous to expose yourself to illness when you gather with others in an enclosed space. But you go anyway, because you need this. You need to see other faces, hear other voices. Remember that your small cottage isn't the entire world. The church is the only stone building in the village. It's cold inside, colder than your cottage somehow, as if the stone holds and amplifies the chill, but at least it's shelter. At least the wind isn't cutting through you. People huddle in the pews, wrapped in cloaks and shawls, breath misting in the candlelight, and there are candles. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, blessed by the priest and distributed to each family. This is what Candlemas means, the celebration of light in the darkest part of winter. You hold your candle carefully, protecting its flame with your cupped hand, and for a moment the church is full of warm, flickering light, full of faces you haven't seen in weeks, some gaunt, some missing. Not everyone made it this far. Not everyone will see spring, but here, present, surviving. The priest speaks about faith and endurance. His words wash over you, familiar and comforting even when you don't fully understand his Latin. But it's not really the words that matter. It's being here together in this moment. It's seeing Agnes still alive, though she looks like a skeleton wrapped in cloth. It's watching the blacksmith's youngest son, the one with the terrible cough, sitting beside his father, still breathing, still fighting. It's catching your neighbor's eye and exchanging a slight nod that says everything. I'm still here. You're still here. We're going to make it. After the service, people linger outside despite the cold. There's news to share, scarce and precious as food. The miller's wife is pregnant, due in spring if she makes it that far. Thomas, the carpenter's son, is betrothed to a girl from the next village, a marriage that will strengthen both families. The Lord Steward is collecting extra taxes this year, which everyone already knew, but complaining about together makes it feel slightly more bearable. And there's practical help too. Quiet exchanges, barely noticed. The widow Eleanor pressing a small bundle into Agnes's hands-dried fish, perhaps, or a piece of salted pork, not enough to save her, but enough to help. Your husband speaking in low tones with 2 other men about sharing work, taking turns, breaking trails through the snow to each other's cottages, making sure everyone's chimneys are clear. The wise woman examining the blacksmith's son, touching his forehead, listening to his breathing, then pulling his mother aside to give her herbs and instructions. No one has much. No one has extra. But people share what they can, when they can. Because everyone understands that survival depends on all of you making it through. If Agnes dies, her children might freeze in a cottage with no adult to keep the fire going. If the blacksmith loses his son, the grief might break him, and then who will repair tools and shoe horses? If anyone falls, everyone suffers. So you help each other. Not out of pure altruism, though there's kindness too, but out of practical recognition that your fates are intertwined. The walk home feels easier somehow. Your stomach is still empty. Your daughter's cough hasn't improved. The cold is just as brutal. But you saw other people. You remembered you're part of something larger than your own small struggle. And that helps. It actually helps. At home, you place your blessed candle in a niche by the door. You'll light it during storms, during illness, during the worst moments. Its blessed flame is supposed to offer protection, though you're not sure you believe that. But it's a symbol of hope, of light persisting in darkness. And right now, symbols matter because they're all you have. The winter solstice has passed you, marked it weeks ago, noting how the days began, almost imperceptibly, to lengthen. Each day now, you get a few more minutes of light. Not enough to make a real difference, not enough to warm the frozen earth or melt the snow, but it's something. It's a promise that winter won't last forever, that the wheel of the year is turning slowly, steadily, back toward life and warmth and spring. Your mother used to tell you stories on nights like this. Not fairy tales, but real stories about other winters, other survivals. She told you about the winter when she was a girl, when the snow was so deep it covered the doors and they had to dig tunnels to get out. About the winter when her grandfather walked to the next village through a blizzard to fetch help for a difficult birth and nearly died of cold on the way back, but saved both mother and baby. About the winter when the whole village ran out of grain in January and survived on nothing but boiled leather and prayers until a thaw let them reach the town and buy supplies. We've always survived, she would say, her voice quiet in the darkness. Winter always ends, always. Remember that when it feels impossible. You tell your daughter these stories now. You tell her about her grandmother and her great-grandfather and all the other ancestors who faced winters just like this one and lived. You tell her she comes from a long line of survivors, people who endured things that seemed unbearable and came through the other side. She listens, curled against your side by the fire, her small body warm and alive despite everything. Her cough sounds a little better tonight. Maybe the herbs are working. Maybe she's just naturally strong. Maybe it's luck. Whatever it is, you're grateful. Your husband is repairing a tool, his hands moving with practiced ease despite the cold and the dim light. The goat is chewing her cud. The chickens are roosting. The dog is asleep. Your small cottage, with all its smells and discomforts and dangers, is full of life, full of breath, full of stubborn, persistent existence. Outside, the wind howls. Snow is falling again, adding to the already deep drifts. The cold presses against your walls, seeking any weakness, any way inside. But the fire burns, the walls hold, and you're all here, together, surviving another day. What traditions or community practices help you through difficult times? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because these practices, these small rituals and connections are what make unbearable things bearable. They're what kept your ancestors alive through winters that should have killed them, and they're worth remembering tonight before sleep. You all share a piece of the blessed candle wax, softened in hot water and swallowed like medicine. It probably does nothing, but it's blessed. It came from the church. It's a connection to God, to faith, to the belief that you're not abandoned in this cold darkness. And belief, you've learned is a form of survival too. The thaw spring's arrival, and then, one morning, something changed. You wake in darkness, as always. Cold air on your face, as always. The familiar weight of the wool blanket, the warmth of your daughter's body beside you, the sound of your husband's breathing. Everything is the same as it's been for months, except it isn't. You lie there for a moment, trying to identify what feels different. The cottage is quiet. Too quiet. Something is missing. A sound you've become so accustomed to that you stopped noticing it, and now its absence is deafening. The wind. The constant, howling, battering wind that's been your companion since November. It's gone. You sit up carefully, trying not to disturb the others, and in that moment you hear it. A soft, rhythmic sound coming from outside. Dripping. Water dripping. Icicles melting in the pale morning sun. The thaw has begun. Your heart does something strange in your chest, a leap, a flutter, a sensation so unfamiliar after months of dull anxiety that it takes you a moment to recognize it. Hope, actual, genuine, uncomplicated hope. You scramble out of bed, ignoring the cold floor, and rush to the door. Your hands fumble with the latch, your fingers are clumsy, shaking with something that might be excitement, or might be disbelief, or might be fear that you're wrong, that this is just a temporary reprieve, and winter will return with vengeance. But when you push the door open and step outside, you know it's real. The world has transformed. The air is still cold, but it's a different cold, sharp and clean, instead of the brutal, bone-deep freeze of deep winter. The sun is rising, actually visible for the first time in days, maybe weeks, and its light is stronger somehow, brighter, carrying the faintest hint of warmth. The snow is still deep, softening, crystallizing, beginning the slow transformation back to water. And there are sounds. Small sounds, tentative sounds, but sounds nonetheless. A bird calling from the direction of the forest. Water trickling somewhere under the snow. The creak of ice beginning to crack and shift. You stand there in the doorway, hugging yourself against the cold that's suddenly more bearable, and feel tears sliding down your cheeks. You made it. Your family made it. You survived another winter, and spring is coming. And you're still alive. Your husband and daughter join you, crowding into the doorway. All three of you staring out at the transformed world like prisoners glimpsing freedom. Your daughter's eyes are wide, and you realize she barely remembers what spring looks like. She was so young last year. Winter has been her entire reality for so long. Is it over? She whispers. Is winter over? Not yet, you tell her honestly, because there will still be cold days, still be frost, still be danger, but it's ending. Spring is coming. The village comes alive in a way it hasn't in months. Doors open. People emerge, blinking in the sunlight like creatures awakening from hibernation. There's a palpable sense of relief, of cautious celebration. You see Agnes outside her cottage, and she looks terrible, so thin you could snap her in half, but she's alive. She's still here. The blacksmith is there, and his son too, still coughing, but coughing into spring, which is better than the alternative. The widow Eleanor is already examining her garden plot, though it's buried under 2 feet of snow and will be for weeks yet. People call greetings to each other, voices hoarse from disuse, but genuinely happy. There's laughter. Actual laughter. Someone makes a joke about the miller's too tight belt, and it's not even that funny But everyone laughs anyway, because they can, because they're alive to laugh. Because winter is ending, and that's worth celebrating. Your husband digs through the snow to check the shed. The roof held. The wood, what little remains, is dry. You venture to the root cellar, climbing down into that dark space with your heart pounding because you're afraid of what you'll find. But there's food still. Not much to turnips, a handful of withered parsnips, some sprouted onions, but enough. Enough to get you through the next few weeks until the first wild greens appear. Enough to survive. That afternoon, for the first time in months, you open the door and leave it open. Just for a few minutes, just to let fresh air circulate through the cottage. The cold comes in, yes, but it's worth it to breathe air that doesn't taste of smoke and bodies and damp wool. The chickens venture outside, pecking at patches of ground where the snow has melted, looking for anything edible. The goat follows them, uncertain on the slippery ice, but eager for a change of scenery. You notice something else, too. Your daughter is playing, actually playing, with energy and imagination you forgot she possessed. She's building something from snow, laughing when it collapses, rebuilding it. Her cheeks have color in them. Her eyes are bright. The cough that terrified you is fading. The warmer air easier on her lungs than the smoke-filled cottage. The days begin to lengthen noticeably now. Each evening, the sun stays up just a little longer. The angle of light changes, becomes less harsh, more golden. And with the changing light comes warmth, genuine warmth, the kind you can feel on your skin when you stand in the sun. One morning, maybe a week after the thaw began, you see it. A tiny spot of green in the mud, where the snow has melted near the cottage wall. You crouch down, hardly daring to believe it, and yes, there it is, a new shoot. Some plant, brave or foolish enough to emerge from the frozen earth. You pick it carefully, your hands trembling. It's chickweed, tender and green and more valuable than gold right now. You bring it inside like a treasure, add it to the morning's porridge, and divide it among 3 bowls. It's not enough to taste, really, but it's fresh. It's green. It's life returning to a dead world. After that, you check every day. And every day, there's more. Chickweed, dandelion greens, wild garlic. Small, scattered patches of growth that you harvest obsessively, adding them to every meal. The flavor is incredible after months of turnips and barley. The nutrition is even better. You can feel strength returning to your body. Energy you thought was gone forever. The wise woman tells everyone to eat the greens slowly at first, not too much too fast, because your body has forgotten how to process fresh food. But it's hard to restrain yourself, hard not to gorge on these first gifts of spring after so many months of deprivation. Your husband ventures farther from the cottage now, checking traps, looking for signs of animal activity. The game has been in hiding all winter, just like you, but as the snow melts, they'll emerge. Maybe there will be fresh meat. Maybe you can begin to rebuild what winter consumed. The church bells ring for the first time. Since Christmas, they were too dangerous to ring in the storms. The bell ringer could have frozen in the tower, and the sound brings tears to your eyes again. The priest holds a service of thanksgiving, and this time when you walk to church, it feels different. Not a desperate gathering of survivors, but a celebration. You made it. The village made it. Not everyone. There are empty spaces in the pews, families that lost members, cottages that will stay dark, but most of you survived. Agnes catches your arm after the service, her grip surprisingly strong. Thank you, she says simply. For what? For the food you shared. For checking on her. For just being there. You're not sure, and it doesn't matter. You too, you say back, and you both understand everything that's left unsaid. Walking home, your daughter runs ahead, jumping in puddles of melted snow, shrieking with delight. Your husband's arm is around your shoulders, warm and solid. The sun is shining. Birds are singing. The world smells of wet earth and growing things instead of smoke and death and despair. You survived. Your family survived. And yes, you lost weight. And yes, you'll carry the memory of this winter's hunger. And yes, next winter will come eventually, and you'll have to do this all over again. But right now, in this moment, you're alive. Your child is laughing. Spring is coming, and that's enough. That's everything. Closing reflection. What winter taught them. Thank you for spending this time with me, walking through a medieval winter, feeling what it meant to survive when survival was never guaranteed. It's strange, isn't it, how distant that experience feels from modern life? You're probably listening to this in a warm room, or perhaps under comfortable blankets, with no real fear that you'll starve before morning or freeze before dawn. You have electricity, central heating, grocery stores full of food from around the world, available regardless of season. You have medicine, emergency services, safety nets. You have all the things that medieval people would have considered miracles, and yet the human beings who lived through those medieval winters were exactly like you. They had the same capacity for fear and hope, pain and joy, despair and determination. They loved their children just as fiercely as you love yours. They worried about the future, treasured small comforts, found meaning in community and faith and simple persistence. They were not primitives or simpletons. They were people complex, thoughtful, resilient people dealing with circumstances that would break most of us today. What did winter teach them? What lessons did they carry in their bones, passed down through generations? First, they learned preparation. They understood, in a way we've mostly forgotten, that your actions have consequences that extend months into the future. The work you do in autumn determines whether you eat in February. The wood you gather in October is the fire that keeps you alive in January. There's no cheating, no shortcuts, no way to postpone or delegate or simply order what you need. Survival requires foresight, planning, and the discipline to do hard work now for benefit you won't see until later. In our instant gratification world, this lesson feels almost radical. We're accustomed to getting what we want when we want it. Hungry, order food. Cold, turn up the thermostat. Need something, click a button and it arrives tomorrow. The connection between action and consequence, between effort and survival, has been severed for most of us. Medieval people didn't have that luxury. They lived with the constant awareness that their choices mattered, that laziness could kill them, that preparation was literally the difference between life and death. Second, they learned the value of community. You noticed, I hope, how often other people appeared in this story. Agnes receiving food from neighbors, men working together to clear paths, the church as a gathering place, the wise woman sharing herbs, the simple comfort of seeing other faces, knowing you weren't alone in your struggle. Medieval society was harsh in many ways, hierarchical, unequal, often cruel. But at the village level, there was a recognition that survival required cooperation. You helped others not just out of kindness, though there was kindness, but because their survival increased your own chances. If Agnes's cottage burned because there was no one to tend her fire, your cottage might catch fire too. If the blacksmith died, everyone lost access to his skills. If the wise woman starved, everyone lost her knowledge of healing. We've gained so much independence in the modern world. We can thrive, even with minimal interaction with our neighbors. We don't need the community in the same immediate, visceral way. But maybe we've lost something too. Maybe the isolation that's become so common, the loneliness that so many people report, is partly because we've forgotten what medieval people knew, that we're not meant to face hardship alone, that survival is easier and life is richer when we're connected to others. Third, they learned gratitude. This might seem strange. Gratitude for what? For the privilege of barely surviving, for cold and hunger and darkness. But yes, actually, medieval people learned to be grateful for small things, because small things were often all they had. A fire that didn't go out overnight, a daughter whose cough improved, a neighbor who shared a piece of salted fish, the first green shoots of spring. These weren't luxuries. They were life itself, and they were appreciated with an intensity we rarely feel for anything. When you have everything, it's easy to appreciate nothing. When you have very little, every small blessing becomes precious. Medieval people lived with death close at hand. They saw children die, neighbors die, sometimes watched helplessly as loved ones slipped away. That proximity to loss made them treasure what remained, made them grateful for ordinary things, warmth, food, health, loved ones who survived. This isn't romanticizing poverty or suffering. Medieval life was brutal, and no one should have to live that way. But there's something we can learn from their perspective, their ability to find gratitude even in hardship, to notice and appreciate the good things, however small, rather than always focusing on what we lack. Fourth, they learned resilience. Perhaps this is the most important lesson. Medieval people faced circumstances that would absolutely destroy most modern people. Imagine telling someone today that they'll spend 4 months cold, hungry, living in one dark room with no entertainment, no communication with the outside world, no relief, no escape. Imagine telling them their survival depends entirely on their own efforts, that no help is coming, that they just have to endure. Most people would break, would give up, would decide it wasn't worth it. But medieval people didn't have the option to give up, so they endured. Day after day, week after week, month after month, they simply kept going. They woke up. They tended the fire. They rationed the food. They cared for their families. They did what needed doing, even when it hurt, even when it seemed hopeless, because the alternative was death. That kind of resilience isn't superhuman. It's profoundly human. It's the deep, stubborn determination to survive that exists in all of us, buried perhaps under layers of comfort and convenience, but still there when needed. Your ancestors had it. You have it too. You just haven't had to access it the way they did. And finally, they learned about cycles. They understood deeply and intimately that nothing lasts forever. Not the warmth of summer, not the plenty of harvest, not the cold of winter, not the hunger of February. Everything moves in cycles, wheels turning, seasons changing. Winter always comes. But winter always ends too. This is perhaps their most valuable lesson for us. We live in a culture that pretends we can transcend cycles, escape limits, maintain endless growth and comfort and convenience. But the truth is, life still moves in cycles. Good times and hard times. Plenty and scarcity. Loss and renewal. Medieval people didn't fight this reality. They accepted it, prepared for it, found meaning in the rhythm of it, because they knew good times would return. When good times arrived, they prepared, because they knew hard times would come again. They lived in balance with reality, rather than in denial of it. So what can we take from this journey through a medieval winter? Not that we should romanticize poverty or suffering. Not that modern comforts are bad. Not that we should live like peasants. But maybe we can remember preparation. Maybe we can value community. Maybe we can practice gratitude for small things. Maybe we can recognize our own resilience, our capacity to endure difficult things. Maybe we can accept that life moves in cycles, and that's not a failure of modern progress, but simply the nature of existence. Your ancestors survived winters that should have killed them. They endured circumstances we can barely imagine. They did it without any of the advantages we take for granted. And yet they persevered, generation after generation, until finally, here you are. You come from survivors. You carry their resilience in your bones. And if hard times command, they will, in some form, because that's life. You have that same capacity for endurance. That same stubborn determination to keep going. That same ability to find hope even in darkness. Remember the medieval woman waking to the first frost, knowing months of hardship lay ahead, choosing to get up anyway, choosing to fight, choosing to survive. That's your heritage. That's your strength. And as you drift off tonight, perhaps wrapped in your warm blankets, surrounded by comfort and safety, take a moment to feel grateful. Grateful for warmth, for food, for medicine, for all the miracles of modern life that medieval people could never have imagined, but also grateful for the lesson they left us, that humans are extraordinarily resilient, that we can endure more than we think, that survival is possible even when it seems impossible, that spring always comes, eventually, if we just hold on long enough. Good night and sleep well. And thank you, truly, for taking this journey back in time with me. If you enjoyed this exploration of history, please like and subscribe. Your support helps me continue creating these stories, bringing the past to life, honoring the people who came before us. Sleep peacefully, and remember, you are stronger than you know.
And so we come to the end of tonight's story. Thank you truly for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. Leave a like if this helped you relax, and share it with anyone who might need a peaceful night's rest. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What part of Genghis Khan's story stayed with you the most? What would you like to explore in future episodes? Your voice matters here. Now, let go of the day. Let go of everything that doesn't serve you in this moment. The step is quiet, the wind is soft, and sleep is waiting for you, gentle and warm. Good night, dear listener. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next story.